In a Senate chamber charged with tension, Jasmine Crockett confronts Ted Cruz and tears open a hidden truth, a deliberate effort to cover up systemic police abuse, with Cruz at the center. What began as a civil rights hearing explodes into a national reckoning. The evidence is real, the silence is broken. So now we ask, when the law shields abusers, who shields the people? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The air outside was heavy with heat, but inside the Capitol it was pressure that made it hard to breathe. Room 216 of the Senate Oversight Committee was packed beyond fire code. Journalists shoulder to shoulder, phones raised like weapons, live feeds rolling coast to coast. The headline was dry: Federal Oversight Hearing on Civil Liberties and Use of Force. But to everyone in the room, this wasn't a hearing. It was a reckoning. At one table sat Jasmine Crockett, sharp suit, sharper eyes, her silence louder than the cameras. Once a public defender who had stood between broken bodies and broken systems, now a rising congressional force. Across from her, Senator Ted Cruz reclined like a king in his fortress, smirking as he straightened his tie. "I assume we're not staging a Netflix drama here," he quipped, not even looking at her. The gavel hadn't dropped, but the battle lines had. Outside, chants echoed, "Justice for Tyre! Who does the law serve?" Inside, it was colder. This wasn't about evidence. This was about who got to define truth on national TV. And by nightfall, someone's legacy was going up in flames. The gavel slammed down like a starting gun. And just like that, the hearing crossed from politics into something far more human. She moved slowly, almost fragile, but there was fire behind her eyes. Rovon Wells, the mother of Tyre Nichols, took her seat at the witness table like someone carrying the weight of a casket on her shoulders. She held a photograph, a smiling Tyre in a Memphis Tigers hoodie, as if gripping the last living piece of him. Her voice cracked as she began. "He called me that night," she said. "My son was scared. He said, 'Mama, they're going to kill me.' And they did." You could hear the breaths hold in the chamber. One aide looked away. Jasmine Crockett leaned in, placing her hand on the grieving mother's with the steadiness of someone who'd held this pain before. "We're going to speak for him now," she whispered. "He's not alone." And then came the crack in the silence. Ted Cruz's voice, cold as marble and twice as smug. He didn't look at the mother. He didn't even blink. "Miss Crockett," he said, voice dripping with condescension, "are you trying to turn this chamber into a theater of emotions?" A ripple of gas shot across the room like electric static. Cameras panned in. Jasmine froze, not in fear but fury building behind her eyes. But Cruz wasn't done. He leaned forward, gaze fixed like a prosecutor about to strike. "Did your son comply with police orders, or did he resist arrest?" Rovon's hand trembled. Her lips parted to speak, but no words came. Her eyes searched the room for someone, anyone, to defend her child. And Jasmine stood, calm, tall, fire in her throat. She reached into her binder and pulled a single folded page. "Let me remind the senator," she said, every word slicing the air, "that this nation is built on rights, not permissions." She unfolded the paper slowly. "The First Amendment of the United States Constitution," she announced, "the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances." Then she turned to Cruz, her voice no longer rising, but narrowing like the barrel of a loaded gun. "Peaceful protest is a right, Senator, not a privilege." Gasps again. A pause so long it rang. Even the chair of the committee didn't interrupt. Jasmine stepped closer to the microphone. Her words dropped like thunder. "You keep asking if he resisted, but you never ask why he's dead." She gestured to the photo shaking in Rovon's hands. "He wasn't carrying a weapon. He wasn't committing a crime. He was trying to get home, pulled over for reckless driving with no evidence. 5 officers chased him down and beat him to death." She turned back to the panel, her voice breaking but still deadly clear. "That's not a tragedy. That's a pattern, and it's killing people who look like Tyre." Over and over again, Cruz leaned back, adjusting his tie, but he didn't speak, because Jasmine Crockett had just ripped the mask off the hearing, and underneath, America was staring at itself. But Jasmine wasn't done. The grief in Rovon's voice hadn't just cracked the room, it had cracked something in her too. And now she was going to let it bleed. She didn't shout. She didn't raise a finger. But when Jasmine leaned toward the mic, the room instinctively leaned back. "You want to talk about compliance, Senator Cruz?" Her voice was steady, but the anger underneath was ice cold. "Let me tell you what happened to me when I asked a cop for a warrant." "Just a warrant. That's it." The gallery went dead silent. Even the photographers stopped clicking. "I was a public defender, just doing my job. My client's home had just been raided, and I asked the officer, calmly, if he had a signed warrant." Jasmine paused. "He didn't answer. He pulled his gun." On me, a gasp somewhere in the back row. Jasmine's eyes didn't move. "I wasn't yelling. I wasn't armed. I had a clipboard and a question, but to him, I was a problem that needed to be shut down. Just because I asked for the law to be followed." She took a breath, but it wasn't to calm herself. It was to keep the pain from cracking wide open. That's what it's like when the rules don't apply to you the same way they apply to him. Cruz scoffed, loud and sharp. He leaned forward into his mic with the confidence of someone untouchable. "Miss Crockett," he said, voice slow and smug, "personal anecdotes, however dramatic, do not make public policy." Then he added colder, "Perhaps if you showed a little more respect for law enforcement, they wouldn't be so quick to draw their weapons." You could hear the entire room gasp. Jasmine didn't blink. She just reached into her folder, slow and clean. "All right," she said, voice low. "You want numbers instead of stories? Let's go there." She pulled out a report and laid it on the table with purpose. 28 wrongful convictions, she said, in just 18 months. She slid it forward. 23 of them were black men. Most of them spent years in prison. For crimes they didn't commit, Cruz shifted. Jasmine didn't. These aren't one-time mistakes. This is how the system works when nobody's watching. Fake confessions, hidden evidence, cops with records longer than their case files. But still on the job, she looked him dead in the eyes. "You called my story dramatic, but it's not rare. It's routine, and people keep dying because of it." She stood, calm, controlled, lethal. "Don't tell me my story doesn't matter. It's happening everywhere. And next time, there might not be someone left to tell it." Cruz looked down. The chairman didn't speak. No one moved. And then Jasmine said the line that crushed the room. "The difference between my story and Tyre's?" I walked away. He didn't. The silence after that wasn't awkward. It was unbearable. Truth had just knocked the air out of the Senate, and it wasn't finished yet. But Cruz wasn't shaken, at least not yet. He sat up straighter, eyes sharp, voice smooth, like a man still convinced the courtroom belonged to him. He leaned forward, speaking slowly, clearly, like someone explaining the world to a child. "A few mistakes don't break the whole system," Cruz said, his tone lined with mock reason. "You don't burn down a house over a leaky faucet." A couple of senators on his side chuckled under their breath. Cruz folded his hands neatly, turning toward Jasmine with a smirk just shy of smug. "Every major institution has flaws. That doesn't mean it's corrupt. It just means it's human." For a moment, Jasmine didn't react. She simply stared at him, as if watching a man hand-deliver his own downfall. Then, without a word, she reached into her binder and pulled out a thick red-tabbed folder marked Confidential. DHS Internal Communication. She rose from her seat, heels clicking like countdowns across the marble floor, and laid the file directly in front of Senator Cruz. He didn't touch it. "What is this?" he asked, tone shifting slightly. Amused, but thinner now. She didn't blink. "A memo," she said. "Department of Homeland Security, dated March 12th, 2019, stamped for internal use only." A pause, then, "It was never meant to be seen by the public." Cruz raised an eyebrow. "And how did you get it?" Jasmine's voice turned cold as steel. "Because someone in your own system couldn't live with it anymore." She returned to the microphone, every step slow, deliberate, like a lawyer in the final stretch of a closing argument. "This document outlines what they call a field-level force protocol, an unofficial policy used by Border Patrol to look the other way when excessive force is used against undocumented migrants." She flipped a page for the cameras. Agents were told to minimize paperwork, avoid body cam review when possible, and, this one's my favorite, exercise physical discretion where identification cannot be verified. The room was dead silent now. Even the stenographer had stopped typing. Jasmine kept going, voice louder now. And buried on page 4, a circulation list. Guess whose name is on it? She didn't need to say it. Cruz knew. Then she delivered the line. Cool, precise, lethal. Your law chooses sides, and the victim never looks like you. The words didn't echo. They detonated. Gasps swept the room like a wave hitting concrete. Reporters stood up. Phones flashed. One aide dropped his notes. Cruz sat motionless, the memo still untouched in front of him, as if contact might burn. His jaw tightened. His fingers twitched. But he said nothing. The committee chair cleared his throat, but even he knew. Control of the hearing had shifted. Jasmine didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply sat down, hands folded again, as if resetting for what came next. Because this wasn't the final blow. This was the fuse, and the bomb was still ticking. But Cruz wasn't the type to sit in silence when cornered. And the moment Jasmine dropped his name, he came out swinging. He slapped his palm on the memo like it had just personally insulted him. This is outrageous, Cruz snapped, voice rising with each word. You're building your argument on leaked documents? Sensitive internal communications? Are we just tossing out national security now? Then with a practiced sneer, he went in for the kill. Miss Crockett, you are knowingly using unlawfully obtained material in a federal hearing. Gasps, audible, sharp. A few senators turned to whisper to aides. One cameraman instinctively zoomed in on Jasmine's face, waiting for her to break. Cruz leaned back, smug returning. This violates every rule of evidence and congressional protocol, he said, loud enough for the gallery to hear. You want to take down a sitting senator with illegally sourced gossip? That's not oversight. That's theater. But Jasmine didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She just leaned slightly into the mic and said, calm as a fuse being lit. Let's clear that up then. She turned her head. Mr. Anders, would you step forward? From the back of the room, a man in a sharp gray suit emerged like a ghost the room hadn't noticed. Until now. Eli Anders, tall, quiet, calm as glass. He carried a hard black laptop case and the weight of credibility. Jasmine gestured toward the witness table. Eli Anders, former DOJ forensic data chief. Currently oversees authentication protocols for multiple federal agencies. All eyes snapped to him. Even Cruz faltered. Eli opened the laptop with precision, hands steady. The memo was submitted to our lab through a secure whistleblower channel, he explained, tone precise, detached. We verified its origin via embedded metadata, email headers, file history, and source registry logs from DHS systems. Cruz cut in, louder, desperate. Anyone can spoof that kind of data. Eli didn't even blink. No, sir. Not when it matches 6 separate DHS backup logs and carries a hash fingerprint tied to their off-site encrypted vault. He hit a key. The screen lit up with server chains and timestamp signatures. It's authentic, Jasmine said, steel in her voice. Then she turned to Cruz, just enough for the cameras to catch her expression. And it's not gossip. It's policy, with your name in the header dead silence. No coughs, no whispers. Just the sound of a man realizing he'd walked into his own trap. He slapped his palm on the memo like it had just personally insulted him. This is outrageous, Cruz snapped, voice rising with each word. You're building your argument on leaked documents? Sensitive internal communications? Are we just tossing out national security now? Then with a practiced sneer, he went in for the kill. Miss Crockett, you are knowingly using unlawfully obtained material in a federal hearing. Gasps, audible, sharp. A few senators turned to whisper to aides. One cameraman instinctively zoomed in on Jasmine's face, waiting for her to break. Cruz leaned back, smug returning. This violates every rule of evidence and congressional protocol, he said, loud enough for the gallery to hear. You want to take down a sitting senator with illegally sourced gossip? That's not oversight. That's theater. But Jasmine didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She just leaned slightly into the mic and said, calm as a fuse being lit. Let's clear that up then. She turned her head. Mr. Anders, would you step forward? From the back of the room, a man in a sharp gray suit emerged like a ghost. The room hadn't noticed, until now. Eli Anders, tall, quiet, calm as glass. He carried a hard black laptop case in the weight of credibility. Jasmine gestured toward the witness table. Eli Anders, former DOJ forensic data chief, currently oversees authentication protocols for multiple federal agencies. All eyes snapped to him. Even Cruz faltered. Eli opened the laptop with precision, hands steady. The memo was submitted to our lab through a secure whistleblower channel, he explained, tone precise, detached. We verified its origin via embedded metadata, email headers, file history, and source registry logs from DHS systems. Cruz cut in, louder, desperate. Anyone can spoof that kind of data. Eli didn't even blink. No, sir. Not when it matches 6 separate DHS backup logs and carries a hash fingerprint tied to their off-site encrypted vault. He hit a key. The screen lit up with server chains and timestamp signatures. It's authentic, Jasmine said, steel in her voice. Then she turned to Cruz, just enough for the cameras to catch her expression. And it's not gossip. It's policy, with your name in the header. Dead silence. No coughs, no whispers. Just the sound of a man realizing he'd walked into his own trap. But as the hearing unfolded, Jasmine's mind kept flickering back to the call that came the night before, and the moment she knew this wouldn't end with a memo. It had been late, past midnight. Her apartment was quiet, city lights bleeding through the blinds. She sat alone at her dining table, surrounded by half-eaten takeout, printed memos, and her open laptop. Her team had gone home hours ago, but she couldn't sleep. The memo she dropped on Cruz earlier? It was strong, but not final. It showed patterns. It proved silence. But it didn't name names. That's when the phone rang. Unknown number. No ID. No text. Just a number and a gut feeling. She answered. Congresswoman Crockett. The voice was low, older, and hoarse, like gravel on glass. This is Jasmine, she said cautiously. I'm calling because I heard what you said today. She sat up. Who is this? I was with Border Enforcement. DHS, from 2019 to early 2021. I was there when this policy started. I saw what it did, and I heard things. Things you need to hear too. Her heart pounded. Go on. There was an internal directive, never written, but very real. If someone didn't have papers and something went wrong, you kept it off the books. No report, no escalation. You let it go. That was the rule. She went cold. You're telling me violence was intentionally hidden. If the victims had no legal status? He didn't hesitate. Yes. Silence on the line. Then he added quietly, I kept a recording from a regional meeting in 2019. Field supervisors. One of Cruz's staffers was there. Jasmine's pulse froze. What did they say? She asked. A short pause, then a clip played. The audio was grainy, but the words were clear. If there's no ID, no phone footage, no noise, let it go. Don't escalate. Senator Cruz wants this quiet. She closed her eyes. It wasn't just a theory now. It was proof. A voice, a meeting, a quote, and Cruz's name in the middle of it. He sent her the file, secure encrypted, digitally signed. She verified the time codes, the server chain. It was real. But now came the harder part. She sat at that table for almost an hour, phone in one hand, audio looping through her laptop. She didn't move. Her thoughts ran in circles. Should I air this? Should I wait? What if it backfires? What if it buries me instead? Releasing it would unleash hell. Cruz's office would call it fake. There'd be legal threats, political blowback, and the worst part, if the public didn't believe it, the damage would land on her alone. But if she buried it, then Cruz walks, the silence stays. And all of this, Tyre, the 28 cases, the memo, would just become another forgotten headline. She couldn't let that happen. And now, right here, in this exact moment, was the perfect time to pull the trigger. So when Jasmine stepped up to the mic that morning, she wasn't just holding evidence, she was holding detonation. The chamber was packed. Reporters lined the walls, shoulder to shoulder, phones raised, live streams rolling. Across the country, millions sat frozen in front of screens. Jasmine Crockett stood at the center of it all, unshaken, composed, lethal. From inside her blazer, she pulled a flash drive. The room tensed. "I'd like to enter one final piece of evidence," she said, her eyes drilling straight through Ted Cruz. "A field recording, taken during a DHS operations meeting in 2019, Cruz's body shifted, subtle, but telling. Jasmine saw it. "What is this? Another stunt?" he muttered, trying to sound annoyed, not afraid. But the cracks were already showing. She said nothing. She plugged the drive in and hit play. The speakers hissed. A scrape of a chair, a cough, low murmurs. Then, "If there's no ID, no phone footage, no noise, let it go. Don't escalate. Senator Cruz wants this quiet." The room gasped like it had taken a punch to the gut. Cruz didn't move. Then slowly his expression changed. His face went pale. His jaw locked. His pupils darted. The performative calm was gone. Now it was just panic. "This is fake," he snapped. "That's not my staffer. That's not me. This is manipulated audio, deepfake garbage. AI tricks. It's not real." Jasmine didn't even blink. She raised one hand. "Mr. Eli Anders, please confirm." Eli stepped forward, cool as ever, and tapped his mic. "Our team ran the audio through 4 separate forensic engines: spectral voice print, hash verification, metadata trace, and chain of custody review." He looked directly at the senators. There is a 100% voice print match. No cuts, no edits, no synthetics. A breath. "Then, it's real." Period. Cruz opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The room was silent, paralyzed. Even the chair didn't move. No one coughed. No one whispered. Because the truth didn't need volume. It just needed silence long enough to be heard. Outside that room, America erupted. Newsrooms broke programming. Anchors went off script. Citizens stopped scrolling and started marching. It wasn't chaos. It was clarity. By nightfall, thousands were in the streets, not breaking windows but breaking silence. From D.C. to Chicago, Oakland to Atlanta, people stood shoulder to shoulder with candles in one hand and fists in the other. They didn't need speeches. They didn't need slogans. They had 5 words. "The law doesn't pick sides." Jasmine didn't say anything else. She just stepped back from the mic, calm, steady, done. Because some moments don't need applause. They just need a country to wake up. The tape was out. The silence was broken. And now the backlash came like a tidal wave. The very next morning, the media split like a cracked windshield. On Fox News, anchors wasted no time painting a target on her back. "Jasmine Crockett, the enemy of order," declared the headline. One host called her reckless. Another said she was weaponizing trauma to undermine national security. Her face was plastered across the screen beside burning flags and riot footage. None of it real time, all of it suggestive. Meanwhile, over on CNN, it was a different world. "She forced the system to look at the truth," read the chyron under Jasmine's live interview. One analyst said, "This wasn't grandstanding. This was accountability, on the record, under oath." Another added, "She didn't just expose a memo. She exposed a mindset." By noon, the pressure had reached the Hill. The Senate Oversight Committee issued an emergency statement announcing a formal, independent investigation into DHS protocols and congressional interference. They used the word grave breach, and that was just the beginning. Within 24 hours, the Judiciary Committee released a second statement, notably brief. "Senator Ted Cruz has been asked to temporarily step back from Judiciary Committee duties pending further review." The photo attached. Cruz walking out of a side exit, jaw clenched, no tie, avoiding cameras. Jasmine didn't say much to the press, just one line outside the Capitol. The truth was never going to be convenient. But it was always going to come out inside the Department of Justice. The ripple effect began. Wrongful conviction review units reopened closed case files from border states, Arizona, Texas, New Mexico. At least a dozen suppressed use of force reports resurfaced. In 3 separate jurisdictions, whistleblowers came forward. One prosecutor requested DNA testing on a man who'd been in solitary for 9 years. And in Memphis, something else happened. A handwritten envelope arrived at Jasmine's office. No return address, just a name scrawled carefully in blue ink. Roe Vaughn Wells. Inside was a short note. You didn't just speak for Tyre. You made the world hear him. For that, thank you. Roe Vaughn. Jasmine held the letter in both hands, motionless. Her staff stood silent behind her. For a long minute, no one spoke. Because this wasn't just about Cruz anymore. It wasn't about politics or news cycles. It was about a country being forced, finally, to ask itself, who gets protected, who gets believed, and who gets buried? But what happened next wasn't rage. It was something deeper, something generational, something that refused to be ignored. They came by the hundreds, then thousands. Not in riot gear, not with smoke bombs or signs on fire, but with backpacks, sneakers, and pocket-sized constitutions held high above their heads. College campuses from coast to coast organized walkouts. High school seniors marched beside their teachers. Some wore black armbands. Others taped printouts of the First Amendment across their chests. In Washington Square Park, a girl no older than 16 held up a battered copy of the Constitution with a single line highlighted in yellow. The right of the people peaceably to assemble. No one yelled. No one pushed. It wasn't chaos. It was control. And it sent a louder message than any megaphone ever could. In Chicago, a line of patrol officers stood across from protesters. The air was still, tense. One officer, mid-20s, helmet in hand, stepped forward. His voice didn't shake. We want to do this right. The others beside him hesitated, then lowered their shields. Cheers broke out, not wild, but stunned, hopeful, fragile, because for the first time, the line between uniform and citizen wasn't confrontation, it was conversation. The footage went viral in minutes. One caption read, "We don't want to fight, we want to fix." Another simply said, "This is what accountability looks like." And behind it all was her. Jasmine Crockett didn't seek the spotlight, but she couldn't escape it either. Her face was now everywhere, on murals in Brooklyn, chalk art in Oakland, and screens from CNN to local school projectors. Students quoted her floor speeches in their civics classes. Professors played the audio clip in legal ethics lectures. Parents pointed to her and told their kids, "That's what courage looks like." But she knew the truth. This wasn't about fame. It never was. It wasn't about beating Ted Cruz, though she did. It wasn't about going viral, though she had. It was about paying a price most people were too afraid to even calculate. She lost allies. She lost funding. She got death threats. She had security posted outside her home. And she did it anyway, because someone had to say what everyone else kept swallowing. The law doesn't protect all of us equally, and until it does, we are not a just nation. That's why she became a symbol, not for what she exposed, but for how she stood there and refused to flinch while exposing it. She didn't hold power, she held truth. And for the first time in a long time, truth didn't feel alone. The battle in the chamber had ended, but the war for justice was only just beginning. The nation was no longer quiet. A Senate hearing that once seemed like another blip in the news cycle had erupted into something else, a fault line running straight through the heart of America. Streets that were once still now buzzed with protest and purpose. Church pews filled with debates. Living rooms became courtrooms. Coffee shops echoed with phrases like due process, equal protection, and Jasmine Crockett. Washington, D.C. felt the pressure first. The Judiciary Committee, bruised from public outrage and media storm, announced a bipartisan task force on law enforcement oversight. It wasn't sweeping reform, not yet. But for a Congress known more for gridlock than momentum, this was the political equivalent of an earthquake. Docket reviews reopened. Prosecutors re-examined sealed files. One memo leaked by Crockett had broken open a dam of silence. Across the country, citizens started holding town halls. In Austin, a former judge admitted to wrongful bias in sentencing. In Detroit, a group of public defenders published names of inmates still serving time under questionable charges. Students at Howard University held a mock Senate trial using the real transcripts from Jasmine's hearing. Fox News hit back hard. Jasmine Crockett, the enemy of order, one headline read in bold red. Pundits labeled her a radical, a threat, a provocateur who used emotion to manipulate process. Cruz himself appeared via satellite interview, jaw tight, voice clipped. We cannot allow personal agendas to dismantle the rule of law. CNN, however, ran the moment again and again. Jasmine's hands slamming the DHS memo onto the table. The audio clip playing, Cruz's stunned silence. The chyron beneath it read, "The system heard her." Did you? Social media became a legal classroom. Teens quoted the First Amendment. Retired lawyers annotated Jasmine's statements on TikTok. A short clip of Jasmine whispering, "The law doesn't get to pick favorites," over footage of the Tyre Nichols protests went viral. But Jasmine stayed quiet. She knew this moment wasn't about her. It was about what came next. Behind the scenes, threats poured in. Her security detail was increased. She received calls from both supporters and critics, the lines often blurred. Some begged her to run for Senate. Others demanded she resign. Then came the letter. A handwritten note from Ro Vaughn Wells, Tyre Nichols' mother. It read simply, "You didn't just speak for me, you spoke for all of us. Thank you." Jasmine cried alone in her office. When she returned to Capitol Hill days later, something had changed. The guards nodded to her with something like respect. A few staffers rose from their desks when she passed by. And Ted Cruz, who once sneered openly, now only glanced sideways when she entered a room. The Judiciary Committee requested her presence for a new hearing, this time to co-chair an inquiry on systemic abuses within federal enforcement agencies. She walked back into the same chamber. Only now she wasn't the witness. She sat at the front, beside 3 senior senators. The seat had a new plaque, Honorable Jasmine Crockett. As cameras flickered to life, Jasmine took a slow breath. The room silenced itself instinctively. She looked into the camera. If the law does not protect all of us, then it is no longer the law. It's a weapon of the powerful, and I will never let that stand. Silence, then applause, then standing ovation. Fox News didn't broadcast that part, but CNN did. So did MSNBC, and within hours, millions of Americans had seen it. The clip was projected on the side of buildings in Philadelphia, Chicago, Portland. "She's not just making noise," a protester said in a street interview. "She's making policy." Students began printing pocket copies of the Constitution with her quote on the back cover. One bookstore sold out in less than 48 hours. Even Cruz, ever the political survivor, reemerged with softened rhetoric. In a later interview, he said, "This isn't about me and Representative Crockett. This is a national discussion we need to have." But Jasmine knew what that meant. He was retreating, not evolving. She wasn't looking for apologies. She wanted change. And for once, it looked like the door was opening. Reporters asked her how it felt to be the face of a movement. She always deflected. "I'm not the face. I'm just one voice, one that happened to be handed a microphone in a moment that mattered." Then came the final moment. A special session was called to review the new proposals. Jasmine was invited to gavel it in. As she stood before the heavy wooden doors of Congress, she could hear the echo of the first hearing, the flashbulbs, the accusations, the silence that followed her evidence. She tapped the gavel once, then twice. The chamber doors opened. The cameras rolled. And as she stepped into the light, a narrator's voice came from the televised documentary being prepared for PBS. Today's knocking wasn't a threat. It was a reminder. These doors were built to open. For everyone, fade to black. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.